Hello.
Well, that's an intro.
Yeah. Hello, and welcome to the IBM Champions Roundtable at Think Broadcast Day 2. I'm your host, Luke Schantz, and I'm joined by my co-host, JJ Asghar. Hello, JJ.
Well, hello, Luke. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I'm hydrated. I've got all kinds of beverages for our stream here. I'm totally prepared. I'm caffeinated.
Perfect. Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is JJ Asghar, and I'm a developer advocate for IBM Cloud. I'm a personable nerd. Let's go with that. How about that?
Excellent. Well,
So
I can concur. You are personable and a nerd. So maybe we should probably get to what we're here for, JJ. So maybe you want to take a round and introduce the IBMers that are going to be joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have two IBMers that are coming in. Andrea, a distinguished engineer, and Troy. I hear you're an ethical hacker. That's we're gonna have to dig into that one here in a minute. But before we go any farther, Luke, with all these cool people here, people might have questions. So how would someone ask a question to us?
Well, wherever you happen to be watching this stream, if there is a chat, I would just drop the question into that chat. And we have folks who are watching that, and they will feed us those questions, and we will get to them later in the stream. If we, by chance, don't get to those questions, or you have questions after watching, there will be an Ask Me Anything happening afterwards, and you can find that on community.ibm.com.
Perfect. So I introduced you, Andrea, but I didn't actually let you speak. So how about now? How about you introduce yourself?
Hey, hi, Andrea Crawford here. I'm an IBM Distinguished Engineer, and I specialize in the DevOps domain. I work in our IBM Cloud Business Unit, and I love solving problems with code, using tech for good, and helping our clients be awesome with automation and application delivery.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Troy, I didn't let you introduce yourself either. How about you introduce yourself now too?
Thanks, JJ. Yeah, my name is Troy Fisher. I'm on the IBM Security Ethical Hacking team. And in that role, I'm a penetration tester where I try to shake out as many bugs in our IBM Security branded products to make sure that they're as secure as possible before they go out to the market.
Is that a DEF CON hat?
It is.
Nice. I do know my logos. Awesome. There you go. So Luke, we have some more people joining us, don't we?
Yes. Our next guests are part of the IBM Champions program. And for those of you who are not familiar, the Champions program are experts and thought leaders around IBM products, offerings, and technologies. They're a diverse, global, and driven group who love to share knowledge and their expertise. You'll find them answering questions, creating content, running user groups, putting on events, and helping others in the community. So let's bring in our champions and say hello. Excellent. Everyone's here. So why don't we, we'll go around. Let's start off. Let me see how everybody's arranged in the windows here. It doesn't matter. Let's start with Vinita Bhushan, president of Points Research. Say hello to our guest.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, please introduce yourself and say hello to our audience.
Well, let me introduce myself. Vinita Bhushan. I'm with Pontus Research, and I've been in the identity and access management space, and I was just counting just before this, and it's so long that I don't want to tell you, about 30 years. So I've been doing this a long time, and we've worked a lot with IBM technologies, so it's been a good journey.
Excellent. Thank you.
Pretty much it.
Thank you. Eric Ducos, CTO at Salient Process.
Good day, everyone. I am Eric Ducos, and my primary expertise, I would say, is in the business automation space. I've been doing business automation since for a long time. Started when it wasn't cool, and now it's cool.
Excellent, thank you. And it is cool. It's cool to be an OG. So Greg Hodgkinson, CTO at Prolifics and a lifetime IBM champion.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to say about myself. So I think you've just done my intro. No, there's a few more things. So as an IBM champion, I think I got invited because as IBM champions like to talk a lot. So I'm sure we've got a lot of great things to talk about today with the very entertaining things we heard about the technology industry. I love the let's create message that's just come out of IBM. It's what we do all day long at Prolifics with our clients. I think it's really positive. At Prolifics, we help our clients build the right solutions, invest in the right ideas, create things rapidly without compromise. And also, we realize that creating is just step one of the process, because once you've created something, you need to look after what you've created. So we also help our customers keep the value high, costs low. So definitely love what I've been hearing over the last 2 days. Look forward to talking about it with you all and get into the discussion.
Thank you, Greg. That's a great point. The cost of ownership. Let's not ignore that. And last but not least, let's say hello to Suganya Rainey, Executive Director, Messaging and Integration. Oh, I think you're muted.
Yep. Can you guys hear me now? Great. Sorry about that. So yes, so I've been in the integration space working with IBM products for almost 2 decades now. So I'm very fortunate to be here, and I am an IBM champion. So like Greg said, we'd love to talk, and I'd like to join the discussion and explore. So
excellent. Thank you.
So Luke, I'm gonna go ahead and jump in, and now that we know a little bit about our audience here, let's go around the horn. And as you can tell, I'm a Texan. Well, who else would say let's go around the horn? I guess. Let's each kind of mention what we thought was really neat or cool about what we watched this morning, because everyone has a different viewpoint. Things jump out at everyone differently. So, Andrea, let's start with you. What was just like, wow, this is awesome?
Yeah, I'm a numbers gal. So when Stephanie Valoris from Forrester came on and started laying out some of the facts around, an average of 3 breaches for 63% of companies in the past 12 months, $4 million per breach in the US in terms of cost. Wow. And then laying out the numbers around 36% of threat actors are external hacks, 24% are internal hacks, half of which of those are sort of malicious. 22% are from partners in our supply chain and ecosystems, and then about 18% are from lost and stolen devices. So really sort of a really sort of concrete empirical breakdown of where these threat actors are coming from and how they're getting in. I
mean, I'm not 200% sure, but I don't know if that was 100%. But we'll come back to that in a little bit. We'll come back to that again and go into in more detail. But it is truly baffling when you look at the numbers breakdowns.
Well, actually, it's more than that. One sec. It's more than that. It's these are the numbers based on what we know. There's a lot of stuff that we never find out about. So when you're talking about numbers, and Andrea, when you were saying wow, I was thinking just multiply that at least by 5 or 6 if you really, or even more than that if you want some real numbers. So just contextually, it's interesting that this is only it's the tip of the iceberg, I think.
True. Yeah.
That's true.
So Troy, how about you? What jumped out at you from today's announcements?
Well, of course, as a hacker, something that Charles Henderson said really jumped out at me, and I think Andrea has the true text. He said something along the lines of that everyone should experience cybersecurity on its best day, and that you should have hackers on your payroll. And of course, that speaks to my heart, and I think it's very true.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Singoya? Did I say that right?
Suganya. Yep.
Suganya. Oh, so close.
You're close. Well, for me, it was more like on, stressing on the security of it, right? Coming from a financial institution, just a Log4j that kind of got us all running, right? And that too on holiday time frame was a big showdown. So just keeping ahead of those things, right? And how that kind of security kind of integrates into some of our mainstream applications, right? So those things were important. And then I also kind of related to the gap of skills and talents, right? We're scrambling to hire good talent and try to understand how we can retain some of the actual good talents that are already in the organization. So those kind of things resonated with me. And I also liked the fact that there's so many MQ products that we have to work with, right? And I've been working with MQ products for so long. So just the magnitude of the products and how we can take advantage of those is another big interest or in point that piqued my interest.
Awesome. Oh, sorry. So Luke, you can do the next two if you like. I meant to tell you that. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. No worries. Vinita, what was your takeaway? What were some things that jumped out today?
Actually, what Suganya said was really interesting. The skills talent, right? The gap between really skilled people. And we're seeing a lot of that in the space I'm in, identity and access management. Because what's happening is there are a lot of people coming in with, purported talents. And when you really go for this true skills and quality and the stuff that experience brings in, it's very hard to find people like that. So we are scrambling, like she said, literally to staff up enough to give people the quality we want to, especially around when you talk about cloud products, IBM products, the whole concept of hybrid cloud, hybrid security. The skills just aren't there. So, we're always looking for creative ways. How much, what do we do? How do we make it simpler? So that's been something that really spoke to me when it was discussed today.
And I think that's an evolving space, right, Vinita? Like, it's not like out there, and it's not like one model fits the world,
Exactly.
right? So,
Exactly.
And then having to review all of these permutations and then figure out what fits your organization is a huge challenge. So,
right. And there's the ramp up time that you have, the training time. And then when you sort of have the turnaround going as quickly as it does, it's very, very hard to decide how to do this best. And automation then comes into it. Exactly. And really, that's the only way. Documentation, automation, all the things we all hate as nerds. That's what we have to do. I mean, there's just no choice.
But I think that the gap is such, it's not just a technology gap sometimes, it's actually a gap of approach of how to think about this problem.
Yeah.
And in our case, I know that we do try to take charge of this. We've got boot camps, and we've got boot camps here and there. They just kind of, over the years, as we have new waves of people that join us, we do try to take charge of it. And we don't just teach technology and technical things. We do teach, in a way, philosophy and approaches, right, and ways to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And Eric, was that what jumped out at you, or was that just a comment?
No, it's just that I think that it is true that there is a shortage, and so I just wanted to mention what we do on our end. We try to control that a bit with what we can do. But what jumped out at me maybe is two things. The first one is, I think the statement was made that there was some percentage of basically identified break-ins. But I was really interested in the fact that there's a presumption from the industry that it will happen. So the chances are 100%. And that we're as interested in stopping you from coming in, but even more in making sure that when you're in, we can neutralize you and make it so that we can limit the amount of influence you have in the environment and how quickly you can progress through it. So that was really interesting. The other thing that really resonated with me, because that's what our organization is very much behind, and that is that there was a statement that was made that organizations have trouble executing business strategies, and that it is still very much a prevalent issue, and for us, this is kind of an explicit mission of ours at Salient Process, where we do try to align process outcomes with organizational goals, right? And we make it so that when you do things with automation, you understand why you are doing it, and then when you're done, then you're able to verify that you're meeting your objectives. I also did like, there was a statement that was made towards the end that basically said something like, if you can't see it, you can't measure it, and then you can't change it. I thought that was really interesting.
That is very interesting, Eric. And I'm actually working on my MBA now, and they talked about this in a recent course about the percentage of like business transformation failures is very large. The number that they gave in my course was upwards of like 70% of business transformations. It kind of, maybe you push it and it kind of slips back, or it doesn't stick. So it is very, very, very relevant point. Greg, Vinitha.
Sorry, go ahead. The other reason why I think transformations and strategies, the reason why you don't really succeed is direction changes. So you're sitting there saying, and I'll talk about my space because I know about it. We were all talking about governance and identity and all of this cool stuff, and it's the new perimeter, whatever. And then suddenly somebody came up and said 3 hacks on privileged identity. Guess what happened? Everyone redirectioned into privileged identity. Suddenly the whole governance story fell by the wayside. So what we are seeing is strategy that is just blown with the wind, and therefore outcomes, you can't really measure them because you don't know what you're measuring. So this is another challenge that I think all our industries have. Eric, and that, to your point, you can have a strategy, doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be what you need to see at the end of the day.
But yeah, and so Vinita, this is one of the big things for us, is that we try to put some context. Automation, I've been doing automation since 1995. Started with the Olympics in Atlanta with an IBM product called Flowmark, way back in the days. And it was workflow at the time. And of course, IBM grew through lots of workflow iterations. But the issue that these technologies don't sort of self-prescribe their proper use still exists. And you still need to put them in context. And today, I think it's more important than ever to say, I'm not just applying a technology. I'm trying to modernize and automate my organization, right? Not just a little bit here and a little bit there. I want to know where it fits in my business strategy, in my capability map, right? I want to know how it affects my value stream. All these processes that I create right now, because we are very much at Salient process in the workflow and decision and RPA space, right? Is all the things that I'm doing right now, how does it fit in my capabilities? How does one feed into the other? How does it actually help answer my organizational goals? And so that's why we have this offering called Automation Compass, which very much helps in that. And maybe at some point we can talk about how we even use some Watson AI to kind of help in that journey for the customer, to help plan and decide what they can do with the IBM platform specifically, actually.
And I don't think it's a failure, right? I mean, I hate to say that word. All these journeys are things that you learn as you go on, right? It's like, okay, we changed direction, but we learned something from going, taking route A, right, as opposed to route B. So I don't think it's a failure, and I'd like to not look at it that way.
Right.
More of like a learning.
Yeah,
exactly. And it adds a lot of maturity to how the organization thinks and works, right? And it's a journey. It's not something that you can obviously say, okay, we're going to get there. It's a journey, and what you learn is important, just not the destination most of the time.
So interesting, Greg. What jumped out from today's broadcast?
So maybe it's the geek in me that we'll often talk about the geek in us that gets tweaked, but Jerry and his messaging was really interesting. He started off talking about autopilot, and he's talking about the in the 1920s, I think, and it was it was a Sperry brought in the first autopilots, and this whole and he then brought that thinking forward to say, obviously having AI to play its role as your autopilots in your business and your automation kind of makes sense. And we're kind of catching up with those ideas. But then he went in a different direction, and he spoke about the left and the right brain working together. And I don't know which way around here. Yeah, the left brain was the business and the right brain was IT. And what he did was interesting, because we tend to silo and compartmentalize. When we talk about automation, we think about, what can automation do for the business? And that's what we focused on for quite a while. And I guess recently we've focused on what automation can do for IT, with AI ops and bringing in AI there. But he gave some good examples that brought those two together. And he started with a business event, and I might get some of this wrong, but the business event was for an airline, and the automation. So the event was some sort of adverse weather that was going to affect flights, and flights are going to be cancelled. All right, so that data is hitting your systems, and then it's going to trigger some sort of automated IT bot, and that bot would then go create ServiceNow tickets to then go and get prod somebody to go and commit more resource to the systems that would handle rebookings. So I thought that was interesting because again, then we've got business events, and the workflow has gone from business all the way to IT, and IT taking some action on their side to make sure that the systems are resilient. And when all those bookings start hitting, there's enough resource to handle it. So that was interesting. But then he also talked about the other way around. So he spoke about an IT event in the banking domain, and he spoke about a node going down somewhere in your IT infrastructure. And if that goes down, there could be, and I forget if there are transactions or some sort of applications that would then be lost. And then there's a bot that's kicking in, a business-facing bot kicking in, that would then go and work out, well, who are the customers that would be affected by this? And that bot would then reach out to those customers and almost like apologize, and also make sure, I think he even said that they would give vouchers or discounts or something to smooth over the loss in what was going on in the process. And again, that's going the other way around. So from an IT event to some sort of business automation. And again, I thought it was really useful because we tend to think about, how can automation help the business? And, we think about chatbots and customer facing, and how can automation help IT? Was really, it needs to be holistic. And it's about how can automation help across my business? I mean, business and IT are so closely coupled in any case, and the lines blurred in so many cases. So I really enjoyed the way he described how those scenarios worked.
It was very interesting. I liked too how it was able to, in his example, give a dollar amount of, hey, this amount of business is in danger, which I feel like it could be a mystery sometimes. If something goes wrong on the IT side, you're like, what does that actually mean to the business? I don't know. To be able to start to connect those dots.
And that's an example of where actually the IT system can outperform the human. I mean, you've got some human in a call center, they don't often have that information in front of them. They just know they need to reach out to somebody and deal with an issue. They don't have access to that data in all those cases. I mean, in this kind of example, the data is available to your automation and can be used to prioritize and then direct where the attention's focused. So yeah, it was really interesting. If I could just talk, I was going to talk briefly. Sorry, Eric, go for it.
No, my thought was when Jay talked about BizOps is that actually I thought that, to me at least, autopilot doesn't necessarily mean that no human is involved. It just means that the human is only involved when they need to be. It's a little bit of a management by exception rather than by control. You're not going to look at your control panel all the time to see and to make sure that everything is okay. But when there is an issue, it's going to be surfaced to a human so that some actions could be taken and all that, right?
It was quite interesting. Just on that point, just very interesting. He actually left the human a little bit of a gap there. So in his example, we had the bots reacting to the adverse weather. And then he said the bot would raise ServiceNow tickets, which would get a human to go and do something. I thought actually it was quite charitable because really you could probably automate that. I mean, the automation should be able to go off and assign resources automatically, but he did leave a small gap there for a person to be involved.
Gotta love auditing. Gotta love to audit your system, right? I gotta make sure everything done to ServiceNow tickets or Jira tickets. No, it's a joke lost. Oh. I tried. But I did want to break in real quick and say that we actually did get a question from audience. And Andrea, you were going to take it for us?
Yeah. So the question, and I'll just repeat the question. It says, I am a fresher I guess that means freshman, or maybe or fresh out of school, maybe. And
It's like
currently
early career.
pursuing my master's in studying. Can you please tell any tips how to study and prepare to get placed into IBM? So thank you for that question, and glad to hear the enthusiasm, and good luck with your master's. I didn't have the discipline to go for a master's. I wanted to get right into the workforce. But I think, in general, we are absolutely looking for talented, passionate people to join our ranks in IBM. And I think, just in addressing the overall, talent skills gap, I think all of us here are looking for fresh talent, new perspectives, out of the box thinkers, such as yourself, who have a passion and a technical curiosity, hopefully, for some of these up and coming areas, AI, security, cloud, and so forth. So I would say, in particular with IBM, we do have a public-facing website for employment opportunities, ibm.com/employment, where we have global postings for open positions of all, early professionals, more seasoned professionals, college hires, new collar jobs where you don't even necessarily have to have a degree in order to step on into the workforce. But we are absolutely looking for passionate people who love to learn, who love to solve a problem, who love to help our clients, and to advance the field of study that interests you, which there are many and various. I know that I'm hoping you may have seen some of the really exciting things that we're working on with IBM Research, and what Dario Gil was talking about, our director of IBM Research. And so I would say, take a look at those job postings, ibm.com/employment, and take a look at what's out there. You can filter by city and, job roles and requirements. And I would say, don't feel like you have to meet 100% of the skills that they're asking for in there, because sometimes a passion for learning and the right kind of attitude can bring you over the line and set you ahead of other candidates. So I'll leave it at that.
Although that's a perfect opportunity to plug Think Academy, right? So if you are lacking some of the skills, there's Think Academy on the Think website. I know you can get onto self-paced training, labs, and certifications. So if you want to catch up on some of those skills, I haven't got to look at them myself, but it's all on the Think website.
One thing I wanted to add to that was more like, you're doing your master's, and I know everybody's like, okay, we have to get a master's done, this and that, right? So I had that big thing going on in my head saying I have to finish my master's before I apply to, bigger companies like IBM, et cetera. So, and that's always not the case. If you have the willingness to learn, I would say apply now, just because we need people who are willing to learn, and we need them now. We needed them yesterday. So don't wait. You never know where you will click. And again, for me, when I hire my talents, my team members, I look for people who are willing to learn rather than come in, knowing it all, right? It'd be nice to have a know-it-all for sure, but that's always an expectation that, a recruiter or a company is looking for, is that willingness to learn. So.
Well, this is, when we first started our stream today, Vanita mentioned the skills gap as something that was important. So I feel like this could parlay, right? And maybe you want to continue and explain a little bit. We can go around then and hear what everybody's seeing. But where the rubber hits the road, where are we seeing the skills gap manifest?
So you know what it is, and I was being very specific to, again, I will talk about the area that I know about. When you look at where I am with security, identity, and access, it isn't, do you know which buttons to click? Have you had experience with this technology? It's understanding what people are looking for A very simple example, a login program, right? If you get all hung up on who's the identity, how do you authenticate, what passwords do you put, where's MFA, blah, 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 it isn't a good user experience. So what we look for is not just somebody who knows how to write a piece of code or do something, but understand how this is going to affect the business. And so to Andrea's point, we do look for passion. We do look for technology and understanding of technology. Don't get me wrong, that's required and it is hard to find. But more than that, what we're looking for is the enthusiasm, the ability to understand the business context and why you're doing it. And that's why we have a gap. I don't think we have any gap in finding people. It's finding people who can think out of the box. It's really talking to people to say, don't worry, don't think that you can't come up with a good idea. Yours might be the next really good idea. It's that confidence building and that mentoring that we all have to go into, where it's not, do you know technologies A, B, and C, but it's, do you understand the business problem we're trying to solve? And that shift is why we're seeing the gap. People come in knowing a lot of things, whether they've done their bachelor's or master's. I'm guilty, I've got my master's, I've got my almost got, you know, I keep collecting degrees. That's not the point. The point is that isn't what has taught me. What has taught me is experience and people willing to spend time explaining things to me. And I think that's where, when we can complain about the gap, it's we also have to put ourselves out to mentor people and to help them grow. So there is a gap. We all need to recognize it, but we all need to also participate in fulfilling or filling that gap more than just, you know, expecting people to somehow magically appear out of the woodwork and do what we want them to. That's my soapbox, Luke.
Oh, no,
It was very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a lot of perspective on this thing.
I did want to just ask the question. You're talking about building the confidence, right, of the people to be willing to stand up and make themselves vulnerable to bring those ideas to the table. Do you have any advice or any thought about how to do that? Because I mean, I'm a dad. I have 2 girls. I'm trying to constantly build up their confidence. So I know it in that space, but in the professional space, there's a whole different world. So how would you tell our audience how to build that confidence to those people trying to step into this?
So one of the key things is I always tell people there's room to learn. Don't come in thinking you know everything. Having said that, recognize what you've learned all these years is going to definitely positively impact your ability to get ahead. Once you've got both of those down, put in hard work. Unfortunately, there is no other way. I don't care where you've come from, what you've learned, there's hard work involved. And then sit back every day and sort of take stock of what you've learned. And one thing we do at Pontus, which really I think helps everybody, is we do sit down at the end of the week, talk through our projects and say, hey, these were my big issues during the week with, you know, where I was. And everybody chimes in and says, here's what I would have done differently or positive. And, you know, it's not even a case of critiquing. It's a case of all of us deciding how we could make this, you know, do this the best way. And people learn with that. And then give them responsibility. You talked about a dad with 2 girls, JJ. I have 2 daughters. They both fled IT and they're both lawyers. Okay, so obviously I'm not the right person to talk about this. But my thinking is, if you give them room to grow and you tell them this is good, what you're doing, but here's where things could be slightly improved, and give them the responsibility. Don't stifle people. That's my advice. Don't get don't get panicky. They will get it right. There may be a few stumbles here and there, but that's the best way to learn. Put yourself out there. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, to extend that thread, Ritika Gunnar, who's one of the VPs in our expert labs here in IBM, talked about 3 buckets, right, when it comes to digital transformation. The first one being technology, the second one being processes, and the third being culture. right? And how those are three sort of buckets of consideration when it comes to artificial intelligence and infusing intelligent automation into the enterprise. And part of it is about she described, I think she called it knowledge work as being the number one area of focus and concentration. You know, the manual labor tasks that AI and IA could help with in terms of addressing the technical skills gap, right? And then Vanita, what you were talking about in terms of culture and having sort of a blameless culture, and as part of the digital transformation, building up a culture of safety and diversity and inclusion, to let the out of the box thinking and the risk of failure be allowed, without sort of this pathological organizational like thing coming down upon you when maybe something doesn't work, right? And she also talked about start with something that's tractable, or something that you have easily controllable, right? So that you can infuse some of these, intelligent automation approaches and techniques in a safe sort of environment, so that, if you do fail, you can use it as a learning opportunity and recover quickly. So I think that was sort of a very interesting aspect coming out of today's Think sessions as well.
So actually, just on that, Andrea, so the interesting thing is you could take that in one way, which is to take culture change and say IT needs to change their culture, but it's actually probably just as much the business that needs to change their culture as well. Because, and in many cases, actually, we were speaking about the skills gap earlier, and there's a way, you could say there's a big skills gap in IT, but actually, I think there's a lot to be said for business getting more involved, and business leaders becoming, to a degree, becoming technologists, and dipping into the IT world, because I think, again, the two worlds have collided in so many different ways, and there's nobody that could speak to just being a pure business person devoid of being really steeped in IT. So I think if business can become more technology focused, not asking them to start coding, but they can now, right? But definitely the culture change needs to be on both sides, both business as well as IT. So
just one thing, if you don't mind, I actually find that pretty funny. Sometimes you might go into, you have a customer that needs some help with their automation needs, and you will ask the business, what do you need us to do? And you try to sort of guide them through that discussion. But sometimes it comes out as some kind of I access this application over here, and then I do that, and then I access this other application here, and then I do some other thing, and then I do this other thing, this other system, and I input this, et cetera, et cetera. And that is not at all a business answer, right? They kind of describe their day-to-day work, and it's like, I have taken the business context out of what I do. I just deal from app to app to app, or from this spreadsheet to this other thing and all that stuff, right? And you spend time trying to automate that bit. Very often, actually, you need to sort of float them back up and say, yes, but what are you trying to do, right? Is what are your inputs and your outputs, your customer needs, whether you're in a supply chain, whether you're, right? I mean, you need to really contextualize that properly so that you can have a good discussion. Otherwise, speaking of autopilot, you might automate all the wrong things, and then you just do them really, really fast, right? Which is really not probably what your organization needs you to do. It might be what your line of business needs you to do, because they don't think maybe of the greater picture. So it's really, really important to set this business context around these discussions.
Eric, are you saying that if you automate a hot mess of a process, you still have a hot mess of a process?
Yeah,
I think so.
And it's unfortunate that I have experience to show for it too. As we discussed, is we grew up in this, right? Is a couple of decades ago, we were just doing automation, which means I'm going to take whatever you have and make it go faster. And that's really not always the right answer.
something that keeps coming up that is so interesting, and we heard it yesterday as well. And I must say, Andrea, I've heard this from you so many times when we've been on podcasts. The importance of culture, right? And it isn't just a technology solution. You can't, and as Eric was just mentioning, it's not just click here, here, and here, because what if that that app isn't there anymore? We're going to replace that. You need to know the why we're doing this. But what comes to mind here too is, hearing the importance of security is also that, and maybe Troy can speak to this, but that it's not, the same with technology. It's not like, oh, we've got the perfect firewall now, problem solved. It is about how we behave and how we use the tools. And yes, the tools may evolve and change, but it's really a culture of security, not like a piece of technology.
Yeah, it totally is. I had a sort of a joke that I came up with when I was designing security awareness posters back in the day, in Arrested Development. Job, he said, magicians, they don't do tricks, they do illusions. And I used to say that perfect security, it's not a trick, it's an illusion. It's not something that you can like do the right thing and it'll happen. It's actually, it can happen. You just have to have this sort of totality of practices. And one of the ways to get there is to have a really strong security culture. And I think one thing that's often overlooked in trying to stimulate that security culture is that no one is perfect. And even the security experts really need to continue to study up on even the basic stuff like spotting phishing attacks, because a lot of that stuff is just psychological. If they catch you at just the wrong time, when you're distracted, your kids are going crazy, and the phone call comes and they say it's the bank and they're asking for your password or your information, and you just kind of like, yeah, whatever, here it is. Like that can happen to any of us. And so I think that sort of dovetails in with that whole blameless culture, is that we're not trying to make people feel stupid or look bad. We need to kind of build people up and really encourage them to focus on the holistic idea of a security culture.
And was it Troy? What wasn't it? Maybe it was I don't know if it was Shawnee Delaney from the CIA or I can't remember who, but the question was asked, what can we do from a cybersecurity perspective? And the answer was, like kind of where could we start, right? And the answer was training and awareness programs for employees, and being able to control our own preparation. And then multi-factor authentication, MFA came up, and I was like, oh wow, that just seems so like basic. I don't know, what do you think about that? You're into like penetration testing and like really getting in there, red team, blue team, and all that security stuff that you do. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I think that was Shawnee that brought that up, and she said something about building security hygiene, and that's a great way to put it. So much of what we do as hackers seems like super high tech, but there was an XKCD cartoon where it says, what hacking looks like, and it's the bad guy is gonna hack the password database and get the guy's password, but in reality he just hands his henchman a wrench and says, beat the victim until he tells you the password. So much of the actual hacks are actually like really simple and low tech. And as a result of that, so much of the sort of nuts and bolts security practices still hold a ton of value. So just having multi-factor authentication and a strong password that you only use on one site at a time, right? You're not using passwords across multiple sites, which a password manager can help with that. Like all those little basic things, you still get a ton of mileage out of them. And if you can do just a lot of that basic security hygiene, you can really put yourself in a good place.
So I have a bank, a customer, it's a financial institution, and I was helping them implement an identity and access management solution. And we had all these checks and balances, and we were looking for penetration testing was done, etc. So I walk into the bank one morning, and the gentleman ahead of me was smoking a cigarette. And you had to actually show your badge, do a whole bunch of things before you were allowed inside and sign in. He opened the door for me. He told the guard it was okay for me to go upstairs. He'd never seen me before, right? So then I go upstairs, and I was just curious. So I kept going, and somebody else opened the door of the bank, the office I was working in. So much for my identity and access management solution with all these checks and balances, right? And then I walk past somebody's cubicle, and their screen is up and it's active, and they walked out to get coffee. So we can put in a lot of the stuff, Troy, that you're talking about. Even today, I mean, where we talk of awareness, it's so critical. People just, however much we talk about, and this comes back to Greg's point, the business has to be IT savvy. But here it was, I was in the IT part of a financial institution. We had put in lots of virtual controls, lots of things to check. I had just come in to do an assessment on that, and I just walked straight in. So there is that human aspect. No matter how much we do with process and technology, we've got to account for people.
The famous story of leaving the USB sticks or your thumb drives, or whatever you want to call them, out in a parking lot and see who actually plugs them in the computers and the stories. It's baffling. It's genuinely baffling on how this happens.
So, but what it means then is that the issue is not just about technology at all. It's just the fact that there are just some very successful criminal approaches that have been used forever, about misdirection, about deception, about I'm going to look at this since the door is left open.
Social engineering.
What is happening?
Yeah.
So speaking
You're
about
a natural.
approaches-
You're a natural penetration tester. You didn't even have to try. You just
Exactly. I mean, it just struck me, right? When he opened the door for me, I was like, oh, let me see how far I can go with this, right? And I keep going. And here I was, I had a badge. Nobody asked me for anything. I just kept smiling at everyone and walked all the way in, and just looked like I knew what I was doing. So that's...
Fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it.
Yep,
So
exactly.
So Charles Henderson. So firstly, Troy, are you part of Charles Henderson's team?
No, I'm on a
Or
different
you're
team.
not part of X-Force? Okay, X-Force, I think that must be one of the coolest titles, being IBM head of X-Force. I mean, that just sounds so amazing. But it was quite interesting. I don't know if anyone else is slightly disturbed by his framing of he was saying the attackers are evolving, and he says what they're evolving their business model. And he said, you got to think of them, they are a business. I mean, it's a criminal business, but it's a business, and they've got HR teams, and they've got recruiting teams, and they've got, the infrastructure teams. So it's quite interesting to think of it in those terms, because it is a industrial scale business. And as much as we've got guys like you, Troy, on the good side, there are some very determined people on the bad side, and they've got significant financial incentive to continue to operate those businesses. I thought it was slightly disturbing hearing it described like that, but it definitely is an eye opener. Because we tend to think of hackers as this guy in the dark somewhere that's trying to get into systems, and maybe he cracks something open and maybe he can get some money out of it. But actually, no, nowadays it's industrial scale.
Right, or a person who has the right access, or just the right access, and is dressed like a CTO or whatever, right? So you can never tell. But I think I concur with Vinita, right? Even consistent training programs, the awareness, because there is a people factor in all of this. So that needs to be kind of kept up to pace, and we need that consistent training, because that's very important. And coming from a bank, I'll tell you the million training that I have to take. It's some of these like really open eyes, because like you said, just holding the door for a person who can enter, right? I mean, we don't know if he has the right access to come into the building. So, yeah.
I think the term hygiene is so interesting here too, because if you think about, it's very basic, but then, it's like if you have a small cut on your finger and it's not clean, you're going to get this infection and it's going to be worse. And I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was something very high, like 85% of, like, say, these ransomware attacks, they start from something very simple, like someone clicking on an email link or downloading a PDF. So it is like that basic foundation. If you mess that layer up, that's when you get into all of these really complex things. And maybe you know about this, Troy, too. I was also researching the other day, like the Mitre attack framework. It's this like metadata about the paths that different attacks take, and it starts somewhere and it migrates through, it gets into systems and it compromises, and then God forbid you get into some sort of ransomware or botnet or something.
Yeah, it's almost like a chess game. There's a relatively limited number of opening moves, but from there it just spiders out, and there's just so many different possibilities. It's limited only to the imagination of the person attacking you and what their creativity is.
And that's what Eric was talking about, right? We're trying to see how we can limit the exposure. There's no way we can stop people from coming in. The question is how can we limit the risk? That's really all we can do now from all our perspectives, I think. We've got to train people, got to do all of these good things. We've got to automate AI, etc. And then we've got to make sure that any vulnerabilities are kept to a minimum.
And I think, there was a lot of talk about taking a zero trust approach as well, right? So that takes a fair amount of forethought and engineering. And I'm sure, Troy, you can talk all about it in terms of trusting no one, and the person that let you in because you looked like a nice person, that's a no-no, right? Big time. Using principles of least privilege and engineering that into your IT environments, to sort of address the IT security, but also, you can't let physical security fall by the wayside either, right? So it's really sort of a holistic and, combinatorial layered approach in order to mitigate as much risk as you can, because nothing is ever 100%, right? And Troy, you mentioned, Charles Henderson, and, he talked about, putting as much space between the attacker and your enterprise assets as much as possible, trying to, layer it up. So to delay, and hopefully you can use, techniques and AI to detect and restrict lateral movement and things like that, right? So it's definitely sort of a holistic, layered approach, and using zero trust. I think there's a lot of techniques out there in the industry to help implement that type of approach.
So, but there is one thing. This just makes me think of a frequent problem regarding automation and security, and that is that. And I don't know how many of you are really involved. Maybe Greg, because you're with Prolifix, right? So, if you're involved with automation from a process or decision standpoint or RPA standpoint, you probably know that. Sometimes in customer solutions, impersonation is extremely useful, and you need to use it for one reason or another. And obviously, being able to impersonate somebody else so that it's traced that they did such and such a thing because of how the system is or how the solution is arranged or whatever, right? But you need some of these capabilities at times. But of course, they also inherently cause problems, because it means that I can do something looking like I'm somebody else, right? And so one of the things that I know I spent a lot of time thinking about is, having worked with the IBM platform for many years, you identify things that you wish that you could extend the platform in some way, right, to answer a specific need. And one of those that we had to think very hard about and provide a solution for was to extend the platform. If you are a customer that uses workflows, sometimes you want to extend your workflow to the public. You want it so that the customers are involved in your process. Yeah, and doing such a thing can be inherently risky, because do you really want to open the entire platform to the internet? And I think that there was a statement that was made today during this morning's broadcast, which is that we're not interested in reducing the attack platform. We can't talk like that. We have to eliminate it, right? Which was really kind of interesting. And for us, what it means in our case is we had to go into some very serious design and security aspect to isolate the IBM platform from the outside world so that the customers could still work with, through some kind of a sort of a token-based approach. I can send you a token and it's a perishable one. And so then if you use it as a customer, then you can go back and, complete a task that is assigned to you, but you're really not a workflow user per se, right? And so there are things like this where I think that from an automation standpoint, we really need to think very hard about the security implications of what we do. If I've got an RPA bot, I bet that does automatically what a human user could do. I bet that the bot is easier to fool than the human is in some cases, right? If I can just have it do a set of tasks, right? The human's going to say, what the heck are you doing here? But the bot might not, right? And we'll still just do the work nicely and efficiently. And so there are really things that if you really think about automation and security, there's lots of questions to ask about that. And lots of work to do, I think, in that area still.
It's great that you brought that up, because we actually had a question come through about, we hear so much about process automation. What are some of the best automation security practices is a question that just came through.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can speak to some of those. Clearly, again, is you need to be careful the way that you design your solution to not create unnecessary entry points. Again, because sometimes impersonation is a very useful thing to do. As an engineer, you might say, "Oh, that's really going to solve a lot of problems," but it creates others, right? And so I like the fact, I know that it sounds very basic when we talked about multi-factor authentication as a foundational thing, but it is. If I send you an email with a special token in it and I say, you can click on this link and then you can access your task, okay? The token's nice. It will sort of cease being valid as soon as you've used it. But I have to make it so that possibly, since I'm going to allow you to take action in my environment, though it's very restricted, right? Is how do I make sure that you are who you say you are? How do I make sure that you didn't forward that information to somebody else so that they can do it in your behalf, right? So there's lots of things like this that you've got to think of. I would say that I can't really give a sort of a standard answer to this, meaning automation and security. You know this already. Security is, you need to think about this at several layers, at the application layer, at the infrastructure layer. There's lots of things, right, in that continuum that you need to think of before you can say, I can truly say that I've got a pretty darn secure automation solution.
So I think there's multiple layers. There's what you talked about, impersonation, thinking it through, designing the solution. But then there are the checks around it. Like if you look at the IBM products, just as an example, geolocation, something is odd about this person coming in from this spot, which is when they always usually work from this time to this time from this geographic location. So you have to have policies for that. So you need to do a holistic thing where you start from, yes, your application is built with very good constructs around it. You've optimized, you're taking tokens that expire, because again, tokens, there are bearer tokens. They're just basically whoever gives them to you, you trust it. There comes vulnerability right there, because what if there's a man in the middle attack? We can keep going on this stuff, but you have to build in the layers and you have to think, how does this person first authenticate to the system? Once they authenticate, what is it they get access to? Is there anomalous behavior checking at that point, monitoring, analytics? And then you let them get to whatever resource it is. And then the resource itself. So you have to build in layers and layers of checks and balances. And to come to your point, Andrea, zero trust. We're a bit away from it because I think people, somehow you cannot start with saying, I don't trust anybody. It sounds great in theory. But let me tell you, the business would shoot you if you go to any commercial institution and say, start with zero trust. It is basically, you have to sort of come with least privilege. So the person can only do the least thing they can do, and then build towards a culture of zero trust. Brings us back to the whole culture thing. You've got to start small, get people to buy into what is, standard, and then improve. Because again, technology, performance, user experience, all this has to be factored in when we talk about security. Because otherwise we become the guys who are keeping people from doing their work.
Right. Another thing I'd like to add was try to eliminate administrative tasks, right? Like opening tickets, closing them, emails, notifications. Those kind of things can all be automated. So trying to eliminate some of the administrative tasks. And then of course you want to reduce noise, right? And then you want to enrich your alerts. I guess when you have your alerts that are out, you need to make sure that they are kind of providing your contextual metadata for your alerts so that, systems can kind of understand, right? In terms of asset management, configuration management, things like that. So it's important to kind of add those smaller things to your workflow for security, I guess. But again, it's a collective effort. And then of course, I like to look at it like as three main things, right? You protect, of course, and then you detect, and then of course you respond to any kind of security breaches. So just something to add and think about.
So when it comes to process automation, so I was going to say the one thing that struck me today, because we work with pretty much all the IBM tools across all the brands, and it's interesting to see some of the common themes now. So one thing I saw very clearly today, there was a video of Instana and the kind of AI ops experience, and then there was the video of the security experience. And actually, if you kind of blurred your eyes and didn't look too closely at what was on the screen, they both look quite similar because they both had almost like a chat ops workflow element to it. So they're both bringing together the power of automation and AI and the ability that, AI does great things with data. In the AI ops example, it's the metrics and it's the logs and all that kind of data. And it's listening to all of that constantly and then working out where the little things are that it needs to bring to a human's attention to focus on. But then the exact same thing was happening in the security example where, again, there's loads of data about everything that's happening inside your environment. And with zero trust, you need to essentially listen in and work out when something's being done that shouldn't be done or shouldn't be allowed or is anomalous, and then bring it to someone's attention. But then it's still that person, that operator, that knowledge worker, in Rudika's kind of terms, that knowledge worker that's being augmented by the system. So it's interesting, there was the workflow elements and kind of orchestrating all this data and the AI, listening in, and then bringing it to someone's attention and allowing them to apply their expertise in a more intentional way, focused on exactly those instances that required a human to look at.
I think one thing that anyone can do to get a bit of security into their automation workflows is to just do a bit of threat modeling on it. That's something that we often think only applies to a shrink wrap software package or maybe a cloud service, or a cloud service rather. But you can threat model anything. So if you have an automation workflow that you're putting into place, just start asking those questions that I'm stealing these from Adam Shostak, who wrote a great book on threat modeling, but ask, what are we doing with this automation process? What can go wrong with it? And what can we do about those things? And just go through that process. If you have a bearer token, then, think about what can happen if one of those bearer tokens is mislaid and someone else gets a hold of it. And how will you take actions to either detect or prevent that kind of attack? If you go through that process, you'll have sort of a unique set of security measures that you can put in place that will be applicable to your automation workflows.
There is one thing I'd like to add, Troy, to me. I mean, the statement that was made this morning about we are trying to completely eliminate it, that's great, but I think it's all right to still work on reducing it first. I think that anything that you can do someone this morning talked about the layers of an onion, right? Is the more layer you can add, I think that the better off you are. One of the things that we ended up doing when I mentioned that the ability for public, meaning external users, to interact with your processes, is we ended up doing something that essentially learns the specific constrained interactions that a person can do. Because if you look at the entire IBM platform, at least for workflow, you can do a huge amount of stuff. Okay. And so we just ended up basically creating this very pinhole constrained thing that basically says, not only am I only going to give you a pinhole access through a proxy and all that stuff, right? So you don't actually directly talk to the IBM platform directly, but we also have something that learns what the user does, so that you only allow that subset of things. So that if you tried, once you have access through that token, right? If you tried to do other things, it would say, no, that's not allowed because I didn't learn that when I looked at the interaction, right? Which again is, I recognize if I say pinhole, Troy is still rubbing his hands together. But I think it's much better than just saying, if I just can't do 100%, I'm not going to do anything, right?
Very interesting. It reminds me, I did some cybersecurity training with my mother last week, and I really just had to focus on not clicking on anything. That was really what I focused on. I was like, don't click on anything anybody sends you. Just go to the website and look it up there. And she I think I got it through to her.
Another thing we really haven't talked about is KPIs, the measurement of what we're doing. Is it successful or not? That's equally important, right? And so it's one thing to say we're going to put all these solutions in place, but really how successful are those solutions? That's another measure, because then you decide, okay, this is something that's useful and it's actually giving me returns on what I'm spending on it. Because ultimately, what's a business about? The business is giving IT money or security money based on value that they're seeing, right? And security is very hard to measure. So in addition to whenever we create controls, it's important to have a way to measure whether those are really successful. And Troy, you can answer to this one, because whenever we do anything, we work with our customers and we say, bring in people to do the penetration testing, see the value of these controls we put in place. And over time, see whether you got less DDoS attacks or whatever it is. And then over time, you can see that this is returning an investment. And for that, actually at Pontus, because we are, again, geeky people, we built a dashboard. Because not everybody has just IBM tools, right? Unfortunately, they'll have a mix. And now you've got a dashboard that shows you some stuff when you're talking of a security access manager or verify or whatever it is. But do you know when you've got something else doing governance, how is the whole big picture looking? And so it's important, in addition to all of these things we talked about, to have a dashboard or an automation or something that shows you the value of what you're doing and what you're spending on, because that is where you start seeing value over time. And your journey, Suganya, coming back to this, it is a journey that you can see whether you're going the right road. Because yes, it's all learning, but you definitely don't want to go in the wrong direction.
It's actually interesting, Vanita. I was having a discussion with a head of security the other day, and we were talking about selling security, and I said it's kind of like selling insurance. I mean, it's a similar kind of sell. You're selling something that's only going to be useful if something goes wrong. But I think actually nowadays there's more to it. There is a financial angle to it, because if you think of large companies, their shareholders want to know that their company has technology, procedures, mechanisms in place to protect them from, all the bad actors out there. I mean, that is something that shareholders are interested in nowadays. So I think now in the world of today, it's becoming more financially relevant in a very immediate way, which I thought was quite interesting.
In fact, the board, now they're asking how cybersecurity aware is the board of a company. which I think is brilliant, because I mean, a few years ago, that wasn't even mentioned, right? The board was all about financial responsibility. How well do you understand transformation, etc. But nobody talked about security. And now they actually have brought it into the discussion. And I will tell you, 26 years ago, I stood in a room somewhere and I said to the person, well, security is a bit like an insurance policy. We all know we're going to die, so it's a good idea to take, measures. And they kind of literally, I used to work at the time with a very large company, and they actually looked at me and sort of said, we don't even connect our computers to the net. It was just in the office, internal. And here we were trying to, same message 25 years later, people understand it, which is really, really fantastic.
I do want to jump in, and I want to be cognizant of people's time. We're getting close to the end of our time together. Got about 20 minutes left. I want to go back around the horn. Again, texting to me sticking out, sorry. And kind of, if you wouldn't mind mentioning something that you felt like you learned from things over the last 2 days, not just today, the last 2 days, or something that you think might have inspired you from the presentations we've had, so we can kind of maybe be inspired by what you've been inspired by, so we can all become better humans. Does that seem like a good idea? All right. So let's go backwards this time. Let's start with Greg over here. Greg, what do you got for us?
So there were two challenges that I got out of today that I think are applicable to pretty much everyone to become, what did you say, better humans. So first was from Dr. Jill. Is it Jill or Gil? Dario. And he challenged us to be an explorer. So he said everyone needs to have that mindset of being an explorer. So you need to be able to look ahead and work out your roadmap. And I think the key items that came out of the last 2 days definitely came through today are the things that need to be on your roadmap are bringing together data. So data is core to everything so that it's accessible, useful, and secure. That was one thing I got out of what should, I think, be on our roadmaps. The second one is how you leverage AI and automation to get value from that data. Needs to be on your roadmap, everyone's roadmap. And then I think one of the things, I think it was used yesterday, they were talking about the four walls of the business, and the business tended to think about what was inside their four walls. And I think definitely in today, it was an eye-opener from a security point of view to say, there's so much going on outside of the four walls of your business that you need to be aware of and take into account, that you need to be able to use, insights, data, and every tool in your toolbox to be able to secure your business, because all the bad guys are out there. The other thing that was challenged to do is be a creator. So I said I really love the new kind of mission of IBM. So again, challenging everyone to be a creator. I think to me what that means is it's so difficult sometimes. We've all got great ideas, and it's only when you start taking those ideas and putting them into practice that you really start sometimes realizing your idea isn't as good as you thought it was. You need to kind of rethink it and make it a bit more real. So I think we all need to challenge ourselves to be creators, get those ideas, start implementing them, move it from an idea to actually getting it off the drawing board, prototype something and start learning, because then you're going to, again, drop the ideas that weren't that great and really make some of the ideas that are worth taking forward.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I was trying to figure out a way to make a joke about this was probably a bad idea for me to say yes to Luke to being co-host or something, but it didn't. I couldn't quite figure out how to get it in there, but that was
you did though. That you said you didn't, but you just did. So that was very clever. Very clever, JJ.
Nice. So Eric, how about you? What kind of what do you think could have made? Yes. What about you, Eric?
Maybe there are two things that they are definitely philosophically related. One of them, I think I heard both of them yesterday. That was not from today's discussion, but yesterday, which was that we're not just interested with automation, and I'm speaking about automation specifically, right, which includes intelligent automation, obviously. We're not really just interested in making shareholders happy, but also stakeholders happy. And it made me think of the fact that I have loved it every time that we've been able to create solutions where the customer, down to the line of business, were delighted. You've just made our lives easier. We just made it so that you don't have to spend so much time on stuff that really is a bit of nonsense. Let's just automate that. And now you have people that are still there. You've augmented them with automation instead of replacing them. And so I thought that that was really good. And I like that thought. I like the fact that automation, I like the fact that IBM ultimately, and that's how it looked like, is interested in sort of people being happy. And that goes to the next part, which is the fact that there was this message of we need to do something that's going to be great for the planet and great for business also. And for many years, for many decades, obviously, those two things have not always agreed. I like the fact that we're really beginning to think about this. I can't tell you exactly all that it means, obviously. I don't know that anybody can, but I like the fact that we're really, really beginning to think about this. And that you can do something that's smart, that's good for your business, and is actually good, either neutral or good for our environment.
It's wonderful. That's great to hear. Vinita, what about you?
So for me, I think what was really good to see is, we've been talking of zero trust and least privilege and all of these models, to actually see IBM putting their might behind making this happen using automation, AI, all of the above, and actually raising awareness in this area, because ultimately that's what we need. We just need people to understand this, think this, and support that. Technology needs to support this. We all recognize the need for it. Now we actually have technology backing it. That for me was very inspiring. And over the 2 days, I heard a lot of conversation around this. So it's really not one or the other. It was zero trust is actually becoming a reality. And that is the only way it can do that is with things like AI helping it along, because otherwise it's almost impractical. So to me, that was very, very promising.
Awesome. I'm trying to figure out a good zero trust joke there, and I'm just not on the game right there. There's something there. There's something there. Imagine I just said it, or don't trust me on it. Huh? Yeah? No? Oh, Andrea's like, yeah, JJ's got it. He's got it. Okay, cool. Sugoya, how about you?
I think it's all of the above, right? The fact that we are in a changing world, but the good thing is, to understand that there are all these thoughtful, world-class leaders, right? That they're just trying to use bold, new, out of the box, maybe, smart technologies and strategies, right? To enable, and the best part is it's all enabled through technology. So to get that, hybrid cloud mindset, or just do on-prem cloud, whatever have you, right? The solutions that I've seen and all the talks that I've heard just kind of is encouraging to kind of say, okay, wow, like these are sustainable strategies that I can put into action, that I can take, not everything that I've heard today, but maybe 2 or 3 things that I can take and go back to my organization and help solve real world challenges, right? Like what I'm facing today could be resolved with, implementing a few things. So that's like pretty awesome. So I think that's something that I would take, and I'm looking forward to, listening and learning, I guess.
Awesome. That's great. That's wonderful. Troy, what opened your eyes?
Well, 2 things for me. One is that I just, anytime anyone talks about artificial intelligence and where that's going, it just always kind of gets my gears going and thinking about all these different ways that even in my day-to-day, as AI gets better and even easier to use, like it could simplify my personal life, my professional life. So like, I just love to think about that. And it's something I really need to study more. And it makes me regret that I didn't pay so much attention to that linear algebra class I took in college. Because
no one needs calculus.
Turns out that that's where it becomes really important. And I wish they would have told me that 20 years ago. The other thing is that I maybe this is more of a shout out, but I just want to recognize the hosts and also Charles Henderson for going out of their way to take back the title of hacker. I had noticed that everyone was like really careful about using criminal or attacker when they were referring to criminals and attackers and not just calling them hackers. And that's just a great thing for us. My title right now is officially ethical hacker, so I still use it. We're the ethical hacking team, and so we're ethical hackers. But I love the fact that as time goes on, I can just call myself a hacker and people know what that is and they don't think I'm some kind of criminal.
Where's your hoodie? Are you supposed to be wearing a hoodie right now?
It's too warm. I actually usually do have a hoodie on most of the time.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome. Andrea, how did what inspired you from Think?
I think overall, just over the course of 2 days, it's our marketing campaign is all about let's create, and Dario bookended that with we are all explorers, right? So being able to sort of pull those two things together, knowing that hybrid cloud driven by AI with security built into the fabric of this hybrid multi-cloud world that we are in today, and being able to direct it towards sustainability, which was a huge, sort of heavyweight theme from yesterday, and helping businesses scale in ways where they can solve more complex problems and deal with all the bits and moving parts that, this virtualized, segmented, cloud native world, introduces all these other moving parts versus the sort of, Clinton era, bare metal, world that we came from, depending upon your age. But I think, in general, just, being able to solve these problems in ways where we are, yes, being sustainable, but also having a security first mindset, and being able to infuse intelligent automation, not because it's cool, but because we have to, because we won't be able to scale and be sustainable without it. So that's pretty much what I got out of these 2 days. And I think the speakers were very dynamic. I love these championship roundtables. It's so interesting to hear from our IBM champions and the questions from the audiences, which were like really awesome and thought-provoking. And thanks to you, JJ and Luke.
Thank you. And I was actually going to ask Luke the same question. What inspired you, buddy, from these last two days, I think?
Well, I think what really surprised me and inspired me was, obviously, we're talking about technology, we're talking about business, but the portion that we were talking about sustainability, culture, and then like today's security. I mean, look at it. We had 2 ex-CIA agents, Charles Henderson, head of X-Force, and Kirsten taught from the governmental cybersecurity infrastructure security agency. It's like, I mean, just looking at that makeup says like, wow, this is really important. And we're taking this chunk of our, this is our platform, and we're using our platform to say these things. And we curated these people because we want you to know it's that important. So I think it's just really interesting that, yes, it's about the technology, but I think when we heard it in this conversation too, that the culture is so important, and it's touching the DevOps, it's touching security, and it's touching sustainability for ongoing business reasons and human reasons. But it's also like, and we talked about this yesterday, JJ, like people don't want to work for places that they don't believe in anymore, right? People want to work at places that they like the culture, they like the people, they like the mission of the company. They're not just going to do something for money anymore. Some people probably do, but most people are looking to do things that they feel good about. And that, I think Eric was kind of touching on this too, that, right, we're getting to this point where, yeah, we have to do both, right? We've got to do the right thing and the good thing and the sustainable thing, and it's got to also be good business. And I think those things aren't incongruent, right? I think that maybe in the past we've approached it that way, where it's like, oh, you've got to choose one or the other. It's, oh, and we're going to seek, we're going to say the good thing and then do the bad thing. But I think we can actually, do the good thing and still be a good business.
Awesome. That's great. Well, we do have one last question that jumped in at the very end here. I'm going to throw this out to the table because I'm not 100% sure who should answer it. And then I think we'll be pretty much done. So from all the automation, we try to remove some of the opportunities for accidents. How do we manage, or how do we remove some of those mutual intervention aspects that result in the most events? Eric, you seem like you got an answer for me. What do you got?
I mean, if it's related to automation makes it so that you don't lose stuff between people. You make sure that you drive processes, you drive sequences the way that you intend them to be, whether it's in a case or in a plain process. You do manage that handoff, you deliver the right work to the right person with the right context. That's an old definition of workflow, still quite valid. But I think that with all of this, right, is you could see how you really reduce the chance of accidents, of stuff getting lost, of you getting the wrong data, working off the wrong information, and so forth, right? And so to me, that's one way that automation helps a great deal. And of course, the other way is the fact that if I can truly automate a task, say with RPA, right, then I make it so that the human that sometimes makes mistakes because I press on the wrong button or whatever, right, that issue is removed. And so to me, those are two obvious aspects.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
thank you. I was going to say, does anybody else have anything else to add to that? Or
I'll just drop on top of that you kind of have to assume that these mistakes will happen, whether they're intentional or otherwise. So having a good auditing policies on top of that, so that you know who did what when, can at least help you recover if and when something does go wrong. And you can also build extra controls on sort of high risk activities, maybe require an additional authentication step before someone can do something particularly critical. There's just a couple things that you can do to add some extra safeguards to those processes.
Yeah, and one example I would say, just that just came to mind, is like offboarding, right? When employees leave, like, do you have a process to offboard them successfully? Because then they turn back like 2 months later and they still have access. And if it's an admin, then you're pretty much dead in the water, right? If the person decides to do something damaging. So that's just an example, right? So I think coming from a financial institution, that's a huge thing that we tend to automate, right? To eliminate administrative tasks as much as we can. And that goes for both onboarding as well as offboarding, right? It should be part of your workflow as you bring in people and, maybe let them leave. So just an example I thought we'd add. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank all of our guests for spending this time with us and having this conversation. It was enjoyable and educational, and I'd like to thank our audience for tuning in and listening. It's been a pleasure to answer your questions. If you have more questions and you sent them through and we didn't get to them, or you just heard this and now you've got some new questions, remember you can jump over to community.ibm.com, and there'll be a link right on that front page where you can go into the Ask Me Anything chat. It is up on the screen there as well, so you can check that out. But again, thank you everyone for joining us. It's really been a pleasure.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.